your triggers are your responsibility, not my obligation to tiptoe around.
Like, for example, my triggers. There are certain things that trigger me. That's not your problem. That's my problem. The trigger is pointing me in a direction to something I have to work on. In yogic philosophy, no one can hurt me unless I allow them to. You can't hurt me. The world can't hurt me. I mean, we said this as children. Sticks and stones may break my bones, right? But you can't hurt me unless I allow you to hurt me. In this world, get ready to be hurt, get ready to be triggered, get ready to be abused sometimes. But how much am I going to let that become the story? It happened to me. It doesn't have to continually happen to me. And it's the meaning I put into what happens to me that creates my future narrative.
Welcome back to this week's episode. We've got an amazing guest as usual, Ray Cappo. And just for the audience, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of this guy. We were just rapping before the show, but I was reading his bio and I'm looking at the original picture and I'm looking and he's sharing a little bit of his story. And I'm just dumbfounded by this. I'm just really taken back at what
I have that effect on people.
What a journey that you've had. I mean, from punk rocker to monk to, running one of the top yoga philosophy shows or podcasts today. Ray Cappo, in the 80s, founded a hardcore punk band called Youth of Today, which in a weird way championed principles of clean living, vegetarianism, and self-control, which I get from the monk side and the yoga side, but from a punk rocker side, I'm not quite sure. But
it was peculiar. I'm just to jump in there. For the hardcore scene in New York in the early 80s, it was like, what?
Yeah, like hardcore scene, right?
We sort of created an island within that scene.
Yeah. That's probably, I mean, it's interesting in the blend of this, but I mean, this is probably, leading into your bio. You went to India, you had a spiritual awakening there. You formed a new band called Shelter, devoted to spreading the message of hope and spiritual connection. And you're currently leading a lot of retreats, training, curtains to what we call, or what you call, your Super Soul Farm Retreat Center, which is in upstate New York, and annual pilgrimages to India. So you're going to tell us a little bit about that. And again, co-founder and co-host of Wisdom of Sages, a daily yoga podcast, been ranked #1 on Apple Podcasts about spirituality. Ray, welcome to the show, my man.
Great to be here. Yeah, the people who know me from Youth of Today, Ray Cappo. Then another part of my life was I taught yoga internationally. And so everybody knows me from my yoga name, which is Raghunath, which was given to me when I was a monk. Usually you have this idea, I think Christians have this idea of rebirth, your second birth. And in India, they have that in the spiritual traditions. It's called your diksha, or it's like almost like you're recognizing yourself as a spiritual being now. I had a material designation. I had a material occupation. I identified myself with a gender, a race, an occupation, a car I drive, a piece of real estate I own. But now we identify ourselves as a spiritual being, and you get a name like, you might know the kirtan singer Krishna Das, or my name is Raghunath Das. It means the servant of God. And that's that we call that our real identity. We're a spiritual being, but we just sort of forgot. And I'd say that's sort of the goal of yoga, is to remember what we forgot, much more than a conversion. By the way, I'm a big talker. You're going to have to really
I'll jump in
with a stick if you want to get a word in.
This is when two podcast hosts interview each other, right? Who gets to talk more? But where did this begin? So, like, your early 20s, you're in the punk scene. How old were you when you started to go through this type of transition in the spiritual work, and how long was it for?
Well, the early 80s. I'm probably a little older than you, but early 80s. It was a world of corporate rock, arena rock. If you were in a band, you would play cover songs of Led Zeppelin, of Rush, of Jay Giles Band. It wasn't like you were writing your own music. So as a teenager, I didn't like the concept of this conformity, of this monocropping our children and myself. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go hang out in New York City, which is a little bit more open-minded. And the Lower East Side of New York became like basically a pilgrimage site for freaks. Anyone who felt like a freak in their high school wasn't welcome. You could have been punk, goth, metal, gay, cross-dresser, whatever you were, where you were going to get your ass kicked in high school. You would go to the Lower East Side and, wave your freak flag, and you'd find unity in differences. But the thing that everybody had in common is we were not welcome by regular culture. And that's my sort of, I feel like that's where I created my own do it yourself ethic within me. That's where that was born from. But with that was a whole nother culture of drugs and alcohol and sloth and lethargy, which was also part of the punk scene. I like the creativeness of the punk scene. I like the individuality. I like the fact that a teenager can get up on stage, write their own music, play their own sounds. But I felt like, you know what? I'm not interested in degrading my mind, degrading my body, degrading my consciousness. I want to be a better person. And I don't know how, and I can give credit to my family. I can give credit to my Boy Scouts. I can give credit to, the Bible. I don't know what it was, but for some reason I realized at a young age that I want to become better in my life. And so I started a band which had very aggressive music, and but the lyrics were a positive change. And I would read a lot of books on metaphysics, on spirituality, on a very inclusive concept of spirituality. I'd read a lot of Eastern thought, and to me, that assisted me to write lyrics. So even the lyrics back then had to do with self-control, disciplining the mind, what goes around comes around, positive mental outlook on life. And because of it, it affected the songs I wrote, and it also thus it affected our audience. And so very quickly we developed a big following of people who were like, yeah, why do we need drugs? Why do we need alcohol? And it sounds sort of sophomoric, if not sort of like, come on, man, who do you think you are? You're 19 years old. You're going around like some
no, but I think it's interesting that at 19, 20 years old, like, your ability to live in that scene with the, call it, discipline and of not falling into the trap of drugs and alcohol. And again, it's like when you think about punk and you think about rock, I mean, it's in the 80s, even the 90s, it is sex, drugs, rock and roll, right? So, I asked you earlier sort of, how the hell did you go from punk to sort of monk? And it kind of makes sense even in your just opening right now, which is sharing that your mindset was always around sort of growth and spirituality and connection and I'm just going to come back to growth. And good for you. I mean, we might argue like punk is about being a rebel, right? And being independent. And the definition of being a punk rock band, focusing on sort of clean living and change and success and growth and mindset, is as individual and as punk as it gets, right?
Well, exactly. And there was a revolution, but the revolution was more internal. It's your own revolution. Instead of pointing fingers at how the government's wronged me, how the world has wronged me, how my family has wronged me, it's saying, you know what? What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me, and how can I autocorrect or self-correct? And I felt that it was an internal calling out your internal shortcomings instead of calling out the problems with everything else, which is very often a smoke screen so I don't have to work on myself. Oftentimes it gets fueled with a lot of ego, and oftentimes when we do something to benefit the world, we end up hating. And in that hate, there's a dopamine rush of a feeling of control, of power, of self-righteousness. And the more I developed my spiritual side within the band, and the more the band get more and more popular and more fans and more accolades, the more I realized, like, okay, how much am I embracing that energy as well? And I started turning not just into cutting off the gross things that sort of can intoxicate us or be diversions or medicate my mind, but what's the subtle work I have to do on myself? How can I deal with this ego? How can I deal with my fault finding or competitive nature? And that's when I started to really apply the practice of the Vedic teachings of India, which are about like pretty much a holistic approach to growth and transformation. Not just fitness, not just a workout, not just careful what you eat, but careful what you see, careful what you hear, careful how you treat yourself, and careful how you treat other people. These are massive things. We just don't want like a physical revolution where now I'm fit and ripped. I was a little plump and portly, but now I have an 8-pack. It's not about that's a thin slice of the pie of transformation. Because if I'm very, very fit, but I'm angry, if I can't forgive people, if I'm resentful, how healthy am I? And so health has a very broad we have a very broad understanding of health and well-being in the concepts coming from the East.
Let's go back to that because, as you're talking, I'm thinking about this is the world we live in today. Everyone is, in some cases, fit but angry. Everyone's blaming the world, hating on the government, hating on the left, hating on the right, this country versus that country. And this younger generation, is driving it. And not to make this a generational thing, but a friend posted the other day and I read it. It said something along the lines of your triggers are your responsibility, not my obligation to tiptoe around. Right.
That's beautiful.
It is, right? And I thought,
it is.
What a powerful quote. And isn't that true? Like, we're living in a world now, call it the woke narrative, where everyone will hate on you and you have to be super sensitive and tiptoe around it and around their triggers. And at the end of the day, it's about taking responsibility for your own growth, right? And what you're talking about here is leaning into self and going, hold on a second, this is something I need to develop and grow and expand. I need to get not just physically fit, but mentally fit and emotionally fit and spiritually fit. And, I love what you said. It's about what you see, what you hear, what you absorb. I'm just paraphrasing, how you treat others, right? How you let others treat you. I have young kids. This is what I want them learning and developing now. So maybe the broad question is there hope for the world? In other words, if you've gone through this transformation, maybe not hope. How do we get this message out more?
Well, I love what you're saying is your triggers. Like, for example, my triggers. There are certain things that trigger me. You might say something that triggers me. That's not your problem. That's my problem. The trigger is pointing me in a direction to something I have to work on. In yogic philosophy, no one can hurt me unless I allow them to. You can't hurt me. The world can't hurt me. I mean, we said this as children. Sticks and stones may break my bones, right? Right? But you can't hurt me unless I allow you to hurt me. And so in this world, get ready to be hurt, get ready to be triggered, get ready to be abused sometimes. But how much am I going to let that become the story? It happened to me. It doesn't have to continually happen to me. And it's the meaning I put into what happens to me that creates my future narrative. And so I have to be very, very careful of how I interpret what triggers me. And instead of blaming the world for it, come on. How about I learn to navigate? I'm not going to be able to change the seasons. I can't change the weather. And if I'm sailing a boat, I can't change. It's going to be a stormy day. I can't change the storm, but I can learn how to become a better sailor. And I think that's the important thing to really teach. And while we're teaching that, I believe the essential things you can give somebody is these universal truths. And this isn't a Hindu thing, because I believe that at the core, spiritual practice is very, very same. We have a lot more in common than we have differences. Unfortunately, culture nowadays focuses on how you are different than me and how we can try to level the playing field. You will never be able to level the playing field on a material platform. You're bigger and stronger than me. Someone else is smarter than me. Someone else is more creative than me. There is no equality on the physical platform and the mental platform. Even twins aren't equal. But there is equality on the spiritual platform. And that's where we extend it, not just beyond gender, not just beyond races, not just beyond political parties, but in all species of life, in the earth itself. We respect beings as spiritual entities, and we treat everybody with dignity. And you don't try to fake it on a material level and try to say, oh, well, we're all equal. We're not all equal. That's okay. That's why I go to New York City occasionally, because I like Thai food and Chinese food and different. I love the fact that we're different on a material platform. On a spiritual platform, we're very, very similar, and treat each other with the highest dignity on the spiritual platform. And I think if you push that message, that's where there can be sort of some peace in this world. Don't try to say, oh, it's all the same. We are all the same. We're not all the same. We're all completely unique beings, but we have a lot in common. You have a lot in common even with your greatest enemy.
Right. 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 Do you think this message is lost in parenting in some capacity today?
It depends who the parents are. It definitely can be definitely lost in parenting. It depends on the parenting.
That's like the whole saying, have you ever wanted to parent another kid? And you're like, yeah. Have you ever wanted to parent the parents? Hell yes, right? So, okay, so let's go back to your time in becoming a monk. I mean, talk to us about that. What was that experience like? How long was it for?
Although I'd love to go back to your moving down to Costa Rica.
We will. We'll definitely go there.
how you dealt with the lockdown and all that stuff, because I had a whole other way to deal with it up here in upstate New York.
Yeah.
But we can pause that and go back to it.
Yeah, we could go there now if you want to. It's up to you.
All right, let's go there now.
This is your show, my friend.
Yeah, I think it was a great choice of yours when these places, when the restrictions came so high. It's like, wait a second. Right. I understand we could die here, and no one knows. It's a big mystery what COVID is.
Right.
But don't you think there's going to be some other issues going on when you tell a child you can't see a child's face anymore? Do you think that's going to affect them in other ways?
So I was called an anti-masker from day one, right? You get labeled very quickly as a conspiracy theorist. But my pure issue with this was this just doesn't make sense in some capacity. And to slap a mask on a kid, my kids were my youngest was 3 at the time, and my oldest was 5. And I had a massive issue with this, right?
Sure.
Specifically for the whole developmental side of things, right? It was a problem.
For sure.
Right. And then the next sort of issue that I had a really tough time with was watching my 5-year-old on Zoom for school, sitting in the chair all slouched on an iPad.
After we tell them, get off your screen, get off your screen, get off your screen. And we're like, get on your screen.
Correct. So there's just these little things happening, and the pandemic or the lockdown in Canada got so severe. Now I was fortunate. I had my office. I still left and went to the office every day, and we had a studio, and
sure.
In a lot of cases, my business really sort of scaled during this because I do corporately, we do leadership development and executive coaching. So being able to now be in front of way more people over Zoom actually was a positive thing for the business. But I felt strangled, and I felt choked and suffocated. And I got to a stage that I was just clenched. I was like, I'm going to snap. And I looked at my wife, and we were actually also having our own marital issues at the time. And I believed that a lot of the frustrations and the challenges in our own conflict had to do with the environment. And we were sitting down with a psychologist, and he says, Greg, taking a vacation isn't going to fix your problems. And I was like, I'm not talking about taking a vacation. I'm talking about changing our environment and then trying to navigate those problems and those conflicts differently. And let's see. And I knew the move was to leave, at least for 2 or 3 months, right? So fast forward this, we're supposed to go out to the US, as I was sharing with you earlier. Couldn't make it financially work because just the house that we need to rent, and I was moving some of the team down with us, and we're going to shoot and work, and I was still going to train. And my wife in the 11th hour said, let's go to Costa. And I was like, find the house. And she was like, here. She spun the computer around. I was like, book it.
Okay.
We took off mid-June. And it was amazing. I mean, within the first 2 days, you come to life, you breathe again. Now, the weather, I think, and what I realized as well, living in Canada, when you're living inside under these fluorescent lights, no sun, I mean, this wears on you. It's not helpful.
For sure.
So that helped. But I saw the kids running barefoot and playing tag, jumping on each other. You just got to understand, we're coming out of Canada. So you didn't go near someone for 6-7 feet. I mean, it was like you would poke people with sticks.
Yeah. What type of anxiety disorders did we create in the name of health?
Correct. Right? That's so funny, which is, let's fuck you up completely mentally because of the projected physical potential consequences from the physical side. I don't know what was worse, right?
You know what drove me crazy? It was I wish they would just say, it was always trust the science, but it's sort of well, there's a lot of other scientists saying other things.
Correct.
And we've sort of muted them.
Correct.
How about we just say, you know what, we're not sure, but we're going to try this plan.
Correct.
We made a vote and we're going to try this plan.
Correct. You know what the worst thing the pandemic did was it removed dialogue. They did. They didn't know how to, and I wish someone would just say, you know what, we screwed up. Right.
We screwed up. It caused a lot of problems we didn't expect that were going to happen. We screwed up a little, and we're sorry. But you didn't get that. It was just they were just as arrogant as they always were, even after everything fell apart, and even if it didn't match their numbers, and even after there's so much questioning that went on, and so much other stuff is coming out now, and it's there's no apologies.
Nothing.
There's no apologies.
Nothing. And you know what I find worse is in some capacity, all the neighbors and the ones which were attacking you for not wearing the mask or going or asking questions, which is like, hey, wait a minute, or have you heard about this? Those individuals have gone silent, like nothing happened. Nothing happened.
Nothing happened. I know something happened. It like created havoc in my family, with my relationships. I know so many addicts who are in recovery went back to addiction. So many of my friends lost their businesses and had to like redo their entire life. My business was completely shut down, but my podcast took off. It was a good thing. It was a saving grace for me.
What was your business at the time? What were you doing?
I bring people to India on pilgrimages.
Right. Okay.
I was an international yoga teacher. All my traveling got shut down, clipped unless I would get a vaccine. Yeah. And anyway, it was a whole thing.
Yeah. Anyway,
I live on a farm, and my kids got to run around on the farm, and it was almost as if nothing changed for them because they were homeschooled the year before, and it just worked out. I don't think it was as heavy on them.
Yeah. Well, thank God you're on the farm. If the idea behind that is if you were in a city, it was completely
sure. I don't know how
caged.
people in the city did it. I would have lost my mind if I went for bike rides every day into the countryside.
Yeah.
And
you know what you did? You got fresh air, you got sun on your face, you got into nature.
And I got to hang out with my family. Yeah.
Yeah. That's all healthy stuff, right? It's healthy living. Yeah. Cool. So that's how we ended up in Costa Rica. The best part of the story is this. So we're here for 2 months. A week before we're supposed to originally fly out, we say, let's extend. We've met all these expats. People are doing this for 6 months, a year. How cool would it be to put our kids in school? They'll learn some Spanish. What a great experience.
How did that go?
The day before our original flights, we panicked. We change our mind. We pack up. We book off to the airport. We check in. We fly to Miami, do our layover there, go do all the PCR testing. And I'm sitting there on Saturday, and I looked at my wife and I said, I think we're making a mistake going back to Canada. What if we cancel our flights and book new flights and flew back to Costa Rica?
Ooh.
And she said, let's do it. And I was like, boom. Anyway,
I like you too. I like you too.
Sunday, we canceled our flights to Toronto and flew back to Costa Rica. Didn't have anything set up. Ended up in the driveway of the house that I rented.
We live the same life, Greg. You and I live. I'm always packing 3 kids up and taking off to some foreign country on a dime.
Let's just go, right?
I love that.
It's such a great experience. And I called my buddy now, but at the time it was his house. And I was like, listen, I'm in your driveway. I need the lockbox code. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, I'm in your driveway. He's like, you just flew out yesterday. I'm like, we're back.
We're back, baby.
And I need to rent this house until we figure things out. And during that 6 months, we made the decision. It's like, I still run my business out of Canada and the US. I travel back and forth a bunch. But I was like, this is where we're going to raise the kids, And if we weren't here, we would be maybe upstate New York on a farm or outside of Ontario on a farm, just in nature.
I get you. I can relate too.
Yeah. So cool. Anyway, you said you pack your kids up on a whim and you travel off whenever you can.
My kids have been to India like 9 times each.
That's amazing. Do they follow in your footsteps? Are they following in any of the spiritual work or at least the yoga?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself being a spiritual teacher for them as much as a parent?
Well, I think a parent always is, but you have different relationships with kids than especially when they at different phases of their life as well.
Right. Where are you going next? What's the next trip?
I'm just going to Detroit for a weekend, and then we're taking everybody to Italy and Croatia.
Wow.
And Serbia and Sarajevo.
Have they been there before?
They've been to Italy, and only one of them's been to Croatia.
Yeah, I was going to say
none of us have been to Sarajevo.
Yeah, what a great experience. I think one of the best educations you can give a kid, even yourself, is to travel. go and
travel, meet
experience.
people, meet different places. It's amazing how many people don't travel. But anyway,
not anymore, man. Not anymore. I mean, when you and I grew up, like that's what you did. You took off at 18.
I was telling my kids, I was like, I was never in a hotel. I never had a hotel growing up.
You had
we had a little
hostels.
camper. We had a little camper. We'd pull over at a KOA campground. We'd go to Virginia Beach. We'd stay with relatives. My parents didn't spend money on vacations. You know,
It's crazy,
I never
right?
left the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut.
What different worlds. All right, let's go back to you being a monk. So
it was a natural switch.
How does that even begin? Like, do you go to a monastery and apply? Like, do you just show up there? Like, what happens?
Well, it was sort of like I tested it out first, but I knew at this point in my life, the band had reached a certain point of success where I realized, you know what? I don't care about this. I really don't care. And I had a record label I started at the time. I had signed 20 bands to a record label that me and my high school friends started. And I just realized, you know what? I have no interest in any of this stuff. I have an interest in my own personal growth. And I couldn't care how many people, pat me on the back and tell me I'm great. When you get off stage, it means nothing to me. I know I'm sort of sitting in the same bathtub I've been sitting in now for 3 years, and I have to move on with my life. And at the same time, and I mentioned this in the book, my father was in a coma those 3 years that I started that band, which was a very sort of confusing place to be. I'm sure it was confusing for him. It was more confusing to me because I was like, is this man alive or is he dead? What is a coma? Is he going to come out of it? Or does he understand when I'm speaking to him? Or is he just asleep? And
how did he end up in a coma?
He got some respiratory disease, and in the recovering process of it, within probably maybe a month time, his lung collapsed due to neglect from the hospital. Actually, he wasn't being watched properly. His lung collapsed, and it put him into a coma, and he never came out. And so it was a real sort of, well, you know what it did to me? It broke my faith in safety of the material world, which made me realize, okay, well, what good is anything in this world if you could lose it in a second? Where is the stability of this world? But because I was cultivating spiritual life at the same time, due to my reading and meeting different people, I started to realize, you know what? I have more faith in the spiritual world than I do in the material world. Because at any minute you could just die. It wasn't like, I also saw my death in his death, because his death seemed sort of random. He wasn't that old. Matter of fact, I'm a few years younger than him when he was. I'm a few years younger than him now than he was when he died. I'm 58. He died at 64. So I was thinking, man, like that could happen to me at any time. Like, what do I want out of life? Who do I want to become in this life? What is the purpose of my life? What do I want to contribute to this life? What's going to be like a home run for me in this lifetime? And it made me ask these like really primordial questions of, who am I? Why am I here? And that sort of like catapulted me on my spiritual journey when he finally left his body. And sometimes it takes some type of tragedy for us to hit the bottom and to spring off the bottom. Like you got to hit the bottom sometimes so you can say, I don't want to be on the bottom anymore. I want to get out of here. And at least okay, this is down. I don't want to go down. I got to go up. And so as tragic as it was, I'm grateful for it, because it was a catalyst for me to search out my own spiritual life. And I already had it just from studying the books of India. I liked the approach, a very broad understanding of spiritual life. It was a very wide gate, or an inclusive understanding of spirituality, which I didn't really find in the Abrahamic traditions, but I did find similar truths. Nowadays, again, people are finding the differences, but I think there's a lot of similar truths in these spiritual paths. But woven to the teachings of India is that it is this concept of inclusivity. That whether a person's a Muslim, a Hindu, a Jew, a Christian, they're on some path towards God realization. And we should find out more what we have in common than what we have differences. Everyone will have different rituals, different outfits, different haircuts, different processes of meditation. What do we have in common with these people? And I think if people could just put that to life, put that to practice, make that their mantra, what do we have in common? The whole world could radically change. That's a new set of lenses we can be wearing in this world that would make the world such a sweeter place to live.
I agree. That was well said. Look for similarities, or look at ways we can align. And as you're talking, it's like, regardless of the religion or the cultural side, everyone's doing the same thing. There is a belief in something bigger than them. There is an exercise and effort to work towards that and to practice it. There's an element in all religion and culture that talks about, being inclusive and aligned. And as we said earlier, I think what the pandemic did was it removed dialogue, and we're living in a world now that, if we're not careful, we're going to slip a little too far this way, where the divide gets bigger. And it is about, and all of the diversity and the inclusion, like you see this in the corporate world, D&I, right? Like, it's almost like it's doing the opposite. And if we're going to remain true to what that is, the exercise is to be inclusive. It's hard, man. I think,
but the question is, with the new concept of diversity or the new concept of inclusion, who is included? If I don't think like you, am I included?
Well, this is what it is today, right?
It's not inclusion. It's inclusion of the people who agree with you, which is a type of exclusion. There's one type of inclusion, and that's seeing everybody as a spiritual being. That is genuine. You will even see your enemies inclusively. You will not, because you won't see them as enemies. They might like not like you, but in real inclusion, you start to respect everybody. And you don't see that in this new concept of inclusivity. Right. What they want to see is, we're inclusive because we all think the same. You're going to try to get everybody to think the same? Give me a break.
Yeah.
Where's your diversity in that?
Exactly. And where's the creativity? Part of, coming from different angles allows us to create something together, right? Allows us to build something bigger. It's in sometimes those small differences that becomes the gems for growth. It's part of the reason I'm in Costa Rica. Like, I look at what my kids are growing up in. They're growing up in with kids that are well off and affluent. They're growing up with kids that are come from extreme poverty.
It's such a good, healthy mix to see all
culture and cultures, right? You name the cultures, right? They're here. Experiences, right? Which is, let's go play dirt and let's, go to a nice restaurant. And the more variety I think I could provide in their life, and the more raw and natural they could be, the better humans are going to grow up. I mean, this is kind of what part of the podcast is about, right? Which is, it sounds a little cheesy, but what could we all do to be better humans tomorrow is kind of where the original idea came from. It's like what kicked off the podcast. And said, why don't we just interview, guys like you, and get your insights and say, what do you think we could do to make this a better world, better humans, better businesses, better communities, et cetera, et cetera. And, hopefully and not just me, right? You can get more and more and more people like yourself also out there focusing and working. I mean, we just might get there.
You focus on the good.
Right.
You focus on what's good. And matter of fact, it's a great way to relate to each other. Correct. Instead of relate to person as, I know why they're different than me because they're like this. Mm-hmm. What is good? First of all, what is good in people that you like? And, write it down. Right. Then the PhD version of that is, what is good in the people that you don't like? Right. And if you can start to train your mind to see good in people that you don't like, this is real revolutionary, because it's going to revolutionize your consciousness, and you're going to build a better person right there. What is good in people I don't like? When you can train yourself, we're trained to see the bad. We're trained to see people's faults. We're trained to be sarcastic, rude, cutting, right? Mm-hmm. To train yourself to see what's good in someone. What a superlative win. What a way to live. What an education.
Yeah. But the way you just described it, being trained this way, I think it's a survival thing. It's a self-preservation thing, right? Like because
we're trying to preserve our ego.
Well, actually,
I feel like I can, by finding your faults, I'm finding what's good in me, but that's bullshit.
Right.
But by seeing everything in wrong in you, that doesn't make me better.
Yeah.
Right. My worth comes from me doing worthy things in this world.
Right. I often say this, which is, by me defining your difference, it defines my normality in my own mind. Right. Like in my own perception. Right. Which is what you just described. Normal.
Exactly. That was beautiful. Yeah.
All right, tell us a little bit about your retreats. I'm super interested. So you're still taking people on lots of retreats. Like, what's that experience like?
This year I'm taking a group to India on a pilgrimage of people. A lot of times people are through yoga, or they are interested in the teachings of ancient India. So we go to holy places, and holy places, holy people, holy temples, holy rivers. And I explain everything that's going on, and we do lots of kirtan. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's call and response chanting, and people find this incredibly freeing. Just something magical about just singing, where you're not trying to sort of be the center, where you're just singing from your heart, and there's sacred sounds, sacred mantras in sacred places. And the trip is quite transformational. I'll get messages or emails or DMs from people who have been with me, 5 years ago, saying, I can't stop thinking of India. So we don't go as tourists. We don't go as backpackers. We go as pilgrims. And that's how I went. And I had such a profound experience in my 20s that I was like, I want to do this for other people. So that's became sort of like part of my personal mission. And I also have recently been taking people to Nepal, which is also, first of all, it's aesthetically breathtaking, but it's also a holy place. There's so many holy places there. It was all part of one great Vedic kingdom, India and Nepal and all these places, Cambodia, Burma, etc. So we do trekking through Nepal, whitewater rafting, and also I give these wisdom talks in the morning and the evening, and there's also kirtan with those. So that's all available on my website, raghunath.yoga.
Raghunath,
Raghunath, again.
Yeah, for the audience, we're going to put that in the show notes. So don't stress if you didn't catch that.
Yeah, and then we have our farm where I do retreats at our farm, which is also super nice. It's just like a little yoga retreat center where I live with my family, and we have, it's small, it's intimate, and it's reasonably priced, and we have a really sweet community that comes from all over. Oftentimes our podcast people come, but I have a big yoga community because I've been teaching for many years. And it doesn't matter if you're new to yoga or been into it for a long time or you're brand new to it. It's sort of all levels. Let's see, where else do we do? We take people to Italy every year too. We stay in the Tuscan hills, and it's a cross between beautiful sightseeing, but it's our podcast retreat. So we do a lot of the yoga philosophy, kirtan, but we go to it's got a beautiful backdrop of Tuscany. So that's always a very popular trip because it's a very reasonable way to go to Italy and have that experience and be with very high caliber people. The type of people we attract I think you would like, because you're into this type of personal growth and things like that. And life is short. I want to be around with people that lift me higher, that touch my heart, that inspire me, etc. Life's too short. I don't want to have a degraded consciousness. It's not worth it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, right? Be a little bit selfish around where you put your energy and who you put that around and who you let into your life as well.
Yeah. And I really try hard to surround myself with uplifting people. And that's and I'm sure it's like this with your podcast too, but our community around our podcast is very, very, it's very inspirational for me to have that every day in my life, and retreats where these people come. It's very, very sweet.
And the podcast is called Wisdom of the Sages.
Wisdom of the Sages. Yeah.
And that's on all platforms, Apple, Spotify.
All platforms and YouTube.
Yeah. Cool. How long have you been doing that? When did you start the podcast?
It's interesting. We started 2020, January 1st.
Yeah, the pandemic.
Yeah, and we didn't realize there was a pandemic, obviously. We actually started in India because we were leading a training in India. And after the 5th week of doing it, I've randomly, if there is such a thing, got a message from Joe Rogan, who is an old friend of mine who we used to do martial arts together 20 years back. And he said, "Hey, I'd really like to get you on my podcast." And I was like, I haven't talked to him in so long. Why does he want me on his podcast? Does he want to debate me about something? And I was like, what's your motive behind this? He goes, well, so many people are into yoga right now, and I know you have such an interesting journey in yoga, and I would just love to hear your perspective. And I said, okay, well, I'm in India right now. He goes, well, when can you get back? When are you getting back? I'll fly you out here. So obviously we got on, practically speaking, I didn't even know what a podcast was in 2020. We just did it because I had so many students that were studying from me anyway. And so when I was on Joe Rogan, because when I knew him, he wasn't super, super famous. He was like on television.
Yeah,
but he was super famous. Yeah, UFC. And so a friend of mine was going, do you understand how big that podcast is? Mm-hmm. This is going to get millions of views. It's like the equivalent when we were young of being on ABC, NBC, and CBS on every late night program combined. And then I just saw our numbers started to quadruple and double, and my likes going higher and higher. So it was a great way to start off. And then the following year, man. It was a perfect setup. And then the pandemic hit. 1 week later or 2 weeks later, the pandemic hit. When everyone was turning towards online education or online entertainment. And we started getting on. And then Rich Roll contacted me. And I got on the Rich Roll podcast.
Yeah, I saw that in your bio. Actually, that was one of the links that I clicked. I'm surprised that in your one pager you don't have your Joe Rogan interview. You should totally put that in.
Yeah, was I crazy?
Yeah, who knows? Anyway, super cool, very cool, man. Talk about the universe. And back to what you were talking about before, just having this type of alignment, right? Life blossoms.
Sure. There's a trust that when you're working to do, instead of like the paranoia where the world is working against you, everybody's out to get me, this opposite, this pronoia that everything is working in my favor for me to evolve. And I'm just going to act as if that is the fact. And it manifests when you're in a mood of like, what can I give instead of what can I get? Things change. Things radically change. And your appreciation changes. You feel less entitled. Happiness comes from being less entitled and more grateful. That's just simple math.
1,000%. That's a great formula.
It's the beautiful formula. I'm sure you, as different as our podcast may be, I'm sure it's very, very similar. Just by the title of yours, I can understand that.
Listen, just before we start to wrap up, let's drop some of your information and links for the audience. If they want to get in touch with you, if they want to learn more about you, if they want to pick up your book, how can they find all that?
Thanks. The book is From Punk to Monk. I think it's Punk to Monk, a memoir by Ray Cappo, Raycappo. And you can get that on Amazon, and they deliver it sometimes the same day, strangely enough.
Look at that.
Someone just said, I ordered 4 of them today, and I got them the same day.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's also available on Audible or anywhere you get a spoken book. A lot of people like spoken books. I do.
Yeah.
And Raghunath, RAGHUNATH.yoga is where I advertise my events that I do or my pilgrimages that I do, and they're very special. And Raghunath Yogi is my Instagram account.
Yeah, I started following you actually. You got a great great account. I like your content.
Thanks. Send me a message so I can follow you back.
I will.
And there is something I tell you, information age like this, there's a lot of reasons to criticize it. And there's a lot of great things. It's just so like food is not bad or good. It's like how much I put in my mouth. That's going to determine whether the food is good or bad. If I'm stuffing myself, even with organic food, I'm just going to get sick. So the information age, if you can use your discernment well, you can add so many positive, uplifting things to your life and to your consciousness, to your mind. And also there's a lot of nonsense information out there as well. Mm-hmm. You can be swept down horrible rabbit holes.
Yeah.
So I'm glad. I'm appreciative of what you're doing for the world, and I'm looking forward to diving into some of the stuff later while I sit on my tractor and mow the lawn this weekend because we have a retreat coming up this weekend.
You are funny, man. Yogi, spiritual leader, John Deere. Gotta move some hay. It's amazing. Listen, man, your energy is awesome. I love chatting with you today. Thanks for spending the time.
Thank you, brother.
Last question, most important question. What do you think we could all do to be better humans tomorrow?
Love that question. Stop complaining and stop blaming. You stop complaining and blaming people for your shortcomings or your sadness or why things do. That is the beginning of liberation. When you take radical responsibility for what you got in your life and then how to move forward in a positive way from there. To the degree that I complain and blame, I am stuck in quicksand.
So true. So true. I like that quicksand analogy.
Mm.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're not following Ray, go ahead and do so. Go check out his podcast. In fact, subscribe to it and listen to an episode and smash some of those stars because it always helps get the message out. If you're not following him on Instagram, highly recommend that. His content is awesome. And check out the website if you're interested in participating in some of his retreats, either at his farm or even in India. Go and check out that information, look at dates, and send a message. As usual, stay happy, stay healthy. Thanks for listening today, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you, my brother. Keep up the good work.